Hi, I'm Sana Chaudhry, the CEO and co-founder of YetiZen. This is the first in a series of videos that YetiZen is doing in partnership with InMobi around the business issues that game developers face. This one specifically is about user acquisition. You know, there's a common misconception in the industry that user acquisition is all about pouring money into the app stores, and well, if you don't have that kind of money, tough, you struggle. We don't believe that's true, and neither did any of the speakers that were actually speaking on user acquisition at our most recent event. So please take a look at this next video, and of course, as always, ping us or InMobi if you have any questions about the topics that we've discussed. See you at the next one.
Great. It's great to be here, and thanks for having us. I just wanted to, so my goal today is to give you all the knowledge I can about user acquisition. I just want to get a sense from you guys how much you guys already know about user acquisition. If you guys have done paid user acquisition before, can you raise your hand? Okay, so maybe about half. If you know what CPI is, can you raise your hand? Okay. For those of you who've done paid user acquisition, how many of you have you done it off of Facebook? So not on Facebook.
Yeah,
okay, so okay, good amount. Okay, good. Okay, so I'll just start off with some of the basics on user acquisition. I'll tell you a little bit about InMobi at the end if you guys want to know, but you know, in general, you know there are a ton of apps out there. You've probably seen all the statistics, but here's some high-level numbers. There are 102 billion apps downloaded in 2013. That is a ton of apps. It's expected to be even higher in 2017. This number is probably already outdated. I wouldn't be surprised if we get somewhere near that number this year alone. But as you probably know, majority of the apps, or majority of the downloads are just coming from a few of the apps. So here you can see 5% of the apps account for 92% of the downloads. So of that 100 billion that were downloaded last year, only 5% made up majority of those downloads. And this is the most critical part here, is that 1.6% of the developers make more money than all the other 98% combined. And this is actually a statistics that I just saw in Wall Street Journal yesterday, I think it was, and probably didn't put it on here. But there are 3 million mobile developers out there. Less than half make, more than half make less than $500 per app per month. And this is the chart, this study that just came out. So if you look at this, you're really looking at 3% making over $100,000 per month, and over $10,000 per month is roughly 12%. So you have a lot of apps out there that aren't being downloaded, and then the ones that are downloaded, very few of them are actually making money. So it sort of begs the question, how do you get your app noticed, and how do you generate revenue on your app? And there's a bunch of different ways to do that, and I think the most comprehensive marketing strategy will take all of these things into account. Social media, blogs, app store optimization with keywords and icons, daily deal apps. There's third-party app stores like Amazon in China. There's a bunch of Android app stores. So there's a bunch of different ways that you really need to kind of combine a bunch of different things to make sure that you have the right mix. Today I'm just going to focus on paid user acquisition because that's what I was asked to do. But the other stuff that's kind of grayed out there is also really important. We recently wrote a book, and I left a couple copies at the front. You might be out of it now.
Couple left.
There's a couple left.
Really highly recommend.
And it's also online.
Yeah, it's on our website, so you can get it on our website. This covers all the non-paid UA stuff, which is, there's a crash course on social media marketing and blog writing and all that sort of stuff in there as well. So feel free to go and download that, or if there's copies left outside, feel free to grab some of those as well. But today I'm going to focus on paid user acquisition. If you guys have questions throughout, please feel free to stop me and ask away. So how do most people discover new apps? The studies show basically majority of the people are finding out about new apps while they're on their phone looking at other apps or other mobile websites. So that's sort of we can get the most engaged user. There's other ways, obviously, social media, print, but you typically find the most engaged users right when they're on their phone in the first place. So if you see an ad on TV, which is becoming more popular now, you'll see ads for Supercell and ads for King and a few others. But
we have a speaker talking about it today.
Okay, great. So that's a great new channel. But typically, you'll see the recall rate higher if you have TV running at the same time. But the way you get the most sort of direct response is people are already on their phone, playing a game and they see an ad for a game that has a really cool graphic or cool characters or some sort of puzzle game that seems, something that's appealing to them. So that's where we find that most people find out about new apps. So given that that's the number one place people find out about new apps, how do you really get placement on there? So the key to user acquisition, there's three main things that I thought I'd like to cover today. Sort of general UA strategy and media plan. Some of the guys here, James from Stormate, probably can talk about the media plans they have specifically. But I can tell you overall from some of our clients how they plan their overall strategy and launch for a game. And then two other things I wanted to touch on at the end are ad formats. Up until maybe 2 years ago, there was really only one ad format, which was the standard banner. There were offer walls too, but that was more sort of on the incentivized side of things. Ad formats, they've really flourished in the past year to 2 years. They were around about 2 years ago, but you didn't see really the scale until the past year. And I'm talking about video, playable, native ads. Those have seen really good results, and you see them really at scale now. And then retargeting, which is also relatively new, where basically you find your users that may have played the game and they've stopped playing and haven't logged on for a session in a while, and we can find them elsewhere in our network, retarget them with a specific ad, like you have free coins waiting for you, and that's something that is relatively new as well. So that's sort of the general summary of what I'll go through. First on UA strategy, people always come to you and say, what's the right strategy? And it really depends at the phase that your app is in. So I like to think of it you look at the life cycle of an app from from launch to when you really scale it up, and then when you're looking at the quality and the retention at the very end. So I'll focus first on the launch. Launch is typically, it would be called like a soft launch. It's when you first sort of launch your app, you're getting it out there. You do really narrow targeting, very specific marketing. You're talking pretty small budgets here. I'll just actually jump right into it. So what launch really is essentially really testing the waters. So you'll maybe work with a few different partners, maybe some that you've worked with in the past, or maybe ones that you've heard of that work well. Facebook tends to be pretty good at this stage as well. You can do very specific targeting. Sometimes you don't get all the scale there, but it's good to sort of see what the demographics are that really like your app. But in the launch phase, you basically test the water, so you do really narrow targeting. So if we had a developer come to us, they might say, hey, we want to do a soft launch. It'll be a 3-week or 4-week soft launch. We want to target just specific country. Typical countries for soft launches would be English-speaking tier 1 countries, but not US. So you'd see maybe Canada or maybe New Zealand and some of the countries that we targeted. They might say we only want to target specific categories of inventory, so we only want to target puzzle games, or we only want to target news or weather, what have you. If you go to the ad network, they can probably make suggestions and they can create sort of a media plan for you of what they think you should do. But the goal here in this phase is basically learn how your app performs, and then make sure just all the pipes are working properly. So the outcome of your launch phase is that you really learn about your user and your app. I think the most important thing is that once you sort of get this first level of scale, besides your friends and family that are using it, you get sort of third-party feedback on how it's working. You can look at things like game mechanics. You can look at if people are dropping off after a certain level, or if the level became too hard, or people don't log in after one session. You can sort of go back to the drawing board and revisit if things aren't working. And this actually isn't related to the UA strategy. It's just part of the soft launch of an app.
Can I actually make a comment there? There's a lot of people who actually spend a lot at this stage, more than they need to, and end up burning through a lot of cash. So with nothing to show for all that ad spend. So a smaller budget to test these things is probably a better idea. Do you have any guidelines for what to spend in what country markets that people can sort of think through?
I think it really depends. The typical soft launch you would see, depending on budgets again, so the size of your company and how much cash you have, the typical you would see is maybe, I guess it varies because you have the Zyngas and the Glues of the world, and you have small developers as well. On average, you probably see $500 to $1,000 per day during the soft launch. But again, it's just a rough estimate, so it really depends.
And adequate soft launch times for most things?
It really depends. Sometimes they continue on. So we've had a bunch this year where the soft launch really just sort of transformed into the official launch or the scale phase. But it really depends. I would say the average would be 2 to 4 weeks. Depends if you have to go back to the drawing board and really change some stuff, or if you're ready and everything works properly and you want to just launch from there.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Really important for you to choose the right UA partners here. So there's analytics partners, there's conversion tracking. So on the analytics side, you might use Google Analytics, you might use Flurry. Various ad networks have their own SDKs that typically offer free analytic solutions. Then there's conversion tracking. So these days, and again, their panel after might correct me here, but most of the partners that we see are using pretty much Tune or AdX or Kochava would be the 3 most used that we see. So those are the standard ones. Or you can also use sort of proprietary ones that come from the ad networks as well. But those would be the 3 that are most common. Analytics, you might see Flurry, Google Analytics. There's a bunch of different ones out there, so it really depends what works best for you. Creative assets, this is a really important phase here because you might have some creatives that work really well and some that don't. When you're using these smaller budgets at the first launch, you can see which creatives have the best CTRs and CVRs. For those of you who don't know, so CTRs would be the click-through rates, and CVRs would be conversion rates. So CTRs basically, if you see the ad on your phone, you click on it, that's the click-through rate. And then once you go from the click and you go to the App Store and then you actually download the app, that's the CVR or the conversion rate. So CTRs are basically determined by the creative quality and also the supply and the network that you're using. But CVRs are basically dependent on sort of how good your landing page is, like your App Store page. So if the graphics look good, if the reviews are good. So regardless of sort of the traffic coming from the network, you want to look at the CVRs as the metric of how well did I convert people that wanted to come to this page to actually download the app and start the app. So creative assets can tell you a lot about CTRs and CVRs. You might find that a certain creative asset that just has one character, or depending on what sort of game you have, for some reason doesn't do well. But a different creative with just a different color but the same character could do much better. Sometimes the CTA or the call to action was a download arrow that's red, and that may work better or worse depending on country, depending on from the left side or the right side. So there's a bunch of different creative testing that can be done during this phase. It's really important to do this at this sort of soft launch phase, so you're not wasting the big budgets later on getting these smaller things figured out. One thing that's important here is you can learn the inventory sources that work the best. So with the partners that you're working with that you've selected, ask them for details. I think the more you ask, the better. They can share details about what worked, what didn't. So they might say that weather apps did not work for you, but games did, and role-playing games did not, but card games did. And they'll tell you really where you got the best conversions and where the best users came from. And depending on how you're integrated with the conversion tracking guys, those are the AdXs and Kochavas of the world, they can actually send post-install metrics. And the post-install metrics will tell you, did someone get to level 1, or you just set the events yourself. If you can feed that back to the ad network, then we can actually tell where those users came from. So we can say it's actually a specific card game site that we have that drove all those users for you that actually bought in-app purchases. So we want to bid up more on those. So any of those learnings that you can take while you're spending the smaller budget at the beginning, you can sort of feed those learnings to the other ad networks that you're working with and tell them, we just want to spend on card games, or we just want to spend on US and UK, let's cut out France and Germany because it didn't work. So there's really a lot of learnings here. I think the more you ask, the better. Depending again on who you're working with, hopefully the ad network will give you an account manager that'll give you all the data that you need, or their UI will be able to sort of give you a bunch of different analytics that will help you identify which sites work the best. Test the plumbing. I put that on there because it's pretty rare to have a launch where something doesn't go wrong. So it's good to have that happen in this phase here. Like you might see from Kochava or AdX that there's no conversions coming through, or the look back window might be set at the wrong time, wrong period. So there's all those sorts of things that just kind of play out during this phase. So it's really good. I think some people want to rush their game out, as soon as possible. This phase is really important, and there's a lot to be done here. I think if you take the learnings you have from this phase, you can really invest wisely during the scale phase. So just make sure you collect as much data as you can here. I think I covered the other stuff on there. I mean, I guess one big piece of this is that you'll get an idea of what your CPI is going to look like. And you'll look at a couple of different partners and you'll see what the CPIs could be. It might not be completely indicative of what it would be on a larger launch, because sometimes the more you scale, the higher the CPIs go. But also sometimes when you have less users out there, when you're doing sort of a narrow targeting, then CPIs can be higher as well. So it really depends on the type of soft launch that you have. But typically work with your partners and they'll kind of explain what they think the CPIs would be during the scale phase based on what you saw at the beginning. So there's certain metrics you would look at and extrapolate from there. Any questions?
Yeah. We found that what happens is you end up with a CPI, but when you try to scale the product, particularly on some ad channels, the CPIs will just climb through the roof when you try to go from, let's say, a $500 or $1,000 a day spend to, let's say, $2,000 a day spend. You're suddenly finding your CPIs triple or double.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different factors that could be causing that. The general consensus is that CPIs get higher the more you try to get scale, because you're trying to reach the next incremental user that costs you more to find, because you're serving ads that are not being clicked on, basically several more times to reach the next user that already doesn't have your app in the first place.
Or you have people in your space going after the same users. That's what tends to be the case.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different factors that could go into it. There could be a huge launch or burst for a different campaign at that time, and they're bidding up the traffic. So there's a bunch of things that really depend. I think keeping a close eye on it is really important. So if you see, that one partner or one ad network, the CPI is really spiking over a 2-day period, they might have some sort of burst going on where there's someone bidding, like a much higher CPC or CPI, and that could be cutting you out for those few days.
Facebook, because I see this on Facebook a lot.
I can't speak to Facebook. I've heard the same thing, but I'd probably defer to some of the other guys that'll be on the panel later to tell you kind of what happens on Facebook. But I mean, Facebook has a similar situation that we do. The only difference is they're just one site. But it's really no different than someone coming to us saying, hey, we want to do a huge launch. We want to buy out, as much as possible at 100K per day, 200K per day, and then it ends up bidding up more to try to get the right traffic for them. So typically if you have a good account manager, they will bring down spend on those days because they don't want your CPI to go too high. So they'll keep it at whatever level it could be to keep the CPI consistent. But it's also important for you to just keep an eye on them as well, because you'll hear stories like what you just said of other people or other ad networks or other partners, Facebook, where the CPI just spikes way too high and it's not what you wanted in the first place. But the general rule of thumb is as you scale up, it will cost a little bit more to reach the next user. That's a general rule of thumb, but there's a bunch of different things that can go into having that be true or not true. Okay, so let's talk about the scale phase. This is really sort of the key phase where you get really the critical mass here. This is where you do the big bursts. This is where you're looking to chart on the app stores. This is really the sort of big investment phase where all the learnings that you took in during that first phase, this is where you use that to make sure that you don't blow through too much money here. You mentioned earlier that some people think that you just blow through way too much money by doing paid UA. And there's definitely a way to do intelligent UA where you're not kind of wasting too much money, but it requires that you're very analytical and paying close attention to what you've learned, even just day over day. But especially from the first phase to the second phase, there's a lot of learning that you can sort of guide your partners here on exactly what you want them to do so that you don't waste too much money. So you're not just learning which sites work at the beginning of this phase, you've already learned it before. So when you scale to whatever it is, 1K per day or 3K or 5K per day or more, that you've given the guidance so you're running on the best performing traffic or looking for the best users or looking for the right demographics. So quick summary of the outcomes that you should have here. Again, burst campaigns are often a big part of this. The biggest hits you see on the charts, all of them do paid UA. There might be an exception here or there with Flappy Bird or what have you, but for the most part, all the top games do a significant amount of paid UA, and they have a whole team that kind of works on this and figures out where do we do bursts, on what day of the week do we do bursts, what times. So all that kind of goes into it, and the people you work with and your partners will be able to guide you on sort of what works best. Again, using some of the data you had from your previous phase. And a bunch of the other sort of offline stuff we talked about earlier, blog posts, Facebook, App Store optimization, keywords, all that sort of stuff, those really play a pretty critical role in this phase. So I really urge you to kind of pay attention to all that sort of, I would call it offline activity, sort of the non-paid UA activity, because you want that to be sort of in sync with this huge investment that you're making on the burst side of things. And again, track and analyze. So make sure you already made sure in the first phase, but just make sure that the tracking is working properly and that you're getting the right learnings. You can continually guide. Like for example, with our clients, sometimes with the really big ones that are spending a ton, we'll have calls with them daily. Smaller ones or ones that don't want to talk to us every day, we'll talk to them maybe once a week. But we'll give them sort of learnings and guidance, and we'll send presentations so they see exactly what's working, what's not, what it would take if you wanted to scale more, if you wanted to scale less, what the CPI would look like. So just be in constant contact with them so that they're aware and you're kind of learning. And then again, sharing that learning across the different networks so you're not wasting money learning on 10 different ad networks. I guess the only other thing I want to point out here in this phase is the continuously refreshing creatives at the very bottom there. That really is critical. People get really bored of creatives. You guys have probably seen it yourself. You see the same ad over and over again, you just get sick of it. If you just change things around like the graphic or the colors or the call to action, it really doesn't have a huge impact. A lot of people would require that you change the creatives every 2 weeks. So I think the more you change the creatives and you do the testing and see what the CTRs and CVRs are from those specific creatives, you can weed out the ones that don't work. But over time, people will just get tired of them because they'll see them. And then the quality user phase. And the scale phase, the length of it or the duration of it is really up to you, depending on how high you want to get on the charts or how much you have to spend. Again, various factors here. But when you get into the quality user phase, this is where you're trying to find those users that are really driving the most value for you. And there's a bunch of different tools here for trying to find these users. So what we like to do is segment users into a couple different buckets. And again, the way you're set up with third-party trackers is really important here. So if you're sending all the data that comes from your app to the ad network through Kochava or through Tune or AdX, and those postbacks come to us, we can optimize based on that data. So if we see that a certain app that we have sent you 50 users that have made purchases over a certain amount, you don't actually have to send the value. And actually, as a word of caution, some people may or may not want to share the actual value of the purchases. A lot of people just set up sort of events that are blind, like we'll say event 1, event 2, event 3. Event 1 for you could be they signed up for an account. Event 2 could be they passed level 5. Event 3 could be that they bought $1 worth of goods. But if you send just even blind data like that back, then we can say, actually our system will do it automatically. It will say those users came from this site, or those users have a certain demographic. And then with that demographic, let's find basically like lookalike based on our user store. Or let's find similar sites based on the publisher where we had those conversions in the first place. So, not all sites are created equal, and not all advertisements are targeted to the right sites. So you might find for a card game that you'll have really high quality users coming from like a role-playing game, but you might not find the reverse. So just because the publisher works really well for 90% of our customers, it might not work well for you. So it's good to have that data, and then we can feed that data back into the ad serving system, and then that'll basically figure out where to bid up. You want to pay more for those users, obviously. So the feedback loop under acquire high quality users there, that's sort of our automated system where the feedback loop basically we get the data from you, we automatically bid more for those sites or for those lookalike demographics because we know those users were good for you. So the more data you have there, the better. Retarget the existing users, this is what I was talking about earlier, but we can find the users that have been dormant, that have downloaded your app but are not using it anymore. We can find those elsewhere on our network and serve them a specific ad that draws them back into your game. Again, refresh creatives is really important, and consider new inventory sources. So here, like if you started out at the beginning of the campaign saying, I already learned in the first phase that I only want to target game sites, you may have found that you've sort of kind of tapped out that whole channel of game sites, and so you might want to consider new sources and say, maybe I'll open it up to entertainment, or I'll open it up to music, or I'll open it up to weather, or sort of different things that might be more expensive that might have higher quality users. So if you find that you have sort of tapped out all the high quality users, consider opening up the sources of inventory. Maybe look at potentially different partners, or just broaden your targeting in general. If you're using Facebook, as you mentioned, you might want to broaden your targeting, because if you would focus just on a certain segment, you might have tapped out that pool of users. And you want to maximize monetization here. I know we're not covering that really in this discussion here, but if you find users that are not monetizing and they haven't made any purchases in an app, it might be time to serve them ads. So I think we have another session at some other point where we'll kind of cover that piece, but it's good to figure out at this phase.
That was the last one.
Oh, it was the last one. Okay, good. And upsell to your existing users that seem very highly engaged. And then you might want to consider new markets. This is sort of under the bucket of broadening your targeting. But we find a lot of our customers are actually coming to us because they want to sort of go east. We have a really strong presence in Asia, so a lot of our partners are coming looking for users in Japan, Korea, where you really have very high quality users there. China's kind of mixed. Southeast Asia is mixed. So
And we'll have a talk on that.
we will have a talk on that. Okay, good. So yeah, we put together Go East strategies for some of the really large guys out there, like which countries would be the best, which ones have the best LTVs, which ones what the average CPIs are. So we would work with your partners on sort of figuring out what makes sense for you on a Go East strategy. So that's basically it on the strategy and media planning side. Any questions so far? Yeah.
Are burst campaigns still a common practice, or are they usually paired with events?
The question was, are burst campaigns still common practice, and are they paired with events? The answer is yes, they're still common practice. I think what you'll see less is incentivized sort of stuff that you don't see as much anymore as part of the practice, just because it affects the App Store rankings. And tied to events, I haven't seen bursts tied to events. You just see regular campaigns, and they'll just flip out their creatives for a while, and there'll be some new event taking place. But I haven't seen bursts around specific events yet. Any other questions on overall strategy here? I covered a lot in a pretty quick amount of time. I think I'm actually running over, so feel free to reach out to me. But again, this stuff is all on a case-by-case basis. So whoever you choose to work with, I think just work with them really closely and ask them for their guidance, and then double check with what other people are telling you, and just kind of consult a few different sources to see what makes sense. But typically, your account manager will know their network the best, so you want to just ask them for guidance on what you think you should do, and then take that learning, just make sure you're spreading that across the different people that you're working with, so you give them the guidance and don't sort of waste money just learning across multiple ad networks. Out of time. 4 minutes. Okay. Yeah.
How big is the change in the CTR rate with changes in creatives compared to the change in potential LTV of those people? So like, I find a creative that CTR is double what it normally is, but then in the back end, those people aren't actually spending any money in my game. Like, is it a 10-to-1 thing, or is it relatively even? You have to be really careful about it. Do you understand?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, we see dramatic changes with different creatives. So there's just one we were looking at last week where we flipped out the creatives and we went from I think it was like 3% CTR and went to like 10 or 11% CTR. That's just day over day. It's just fresh creatives. In terms of LTV, you can definitely look at the analytics by creative. The creative reporting is actually really interesting and really important to look at, and especially again giving you the guidance to know how to spend your money wisely across other partners as well, so you don't spend all the money learning on every partner that you're working with. So I'll quickly go through ad formats. The newest things, and they're not, I wouldn't say new, but I think having them be at the sort of scale that they're at today, video, native, and playable are really big, and they're driving much higher quality users. Video, I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about it, but video consumption on mobile is up 60% this year, compared to last year, and CTRs are obviously higher. Our video ads are sort of like non-intrusive. They're skippable. They're 15 seconds. The audio is automatically off at the beginning. Even with all this, the CTRs and CVRs are just really way higher, and the quality of users are also way higher. The idea in general with video and playable is that you're kind of pre-screening the user beforehand. They're getting a glimpse of what the game is like to play. And if they've seen that, and then they click on the ad, or then they click on the link to go to the App Store, then they're going to be that much more interested than the people that just saw a tiny banner and then got to the App Store page and were like, wait, this is not for me. Or that go to the App Store page, then download it and try it and realize this is not for me. Versus if you've seen 15-second ad or played 30 seconds of the game, it's much different. I will skip ahead, but this is probably of interest that the quality of users is much higher on video. Here's some statistics on that. Native, you guys have probably heard a lot about. That's sort of the buzzword now. Again, you have much higher click-through rates here. This is a sample of in a news feed, but there's a bunch of different. Here's Tango is one of our partners. It shows up in the news feed, very similar to Facebook. You'll see it in news. You'll see it in chat apps. You'll see it in a bunch of different ad formats, and the statistics all look really good on Native. Playable, this is, again, relatively new at scale, but you basically send your APK file, and that becomes the ad format itself, and it's like a 30 or 50-second play of the game. Obviously, you can imagine if someone's playing 30 seconds, 50 seconds to your game, and then they click on the ad after, they're going to be a pretty high-quality user. That's exactly what we see in the metrics that we've been looking at. So, retargeting. I mentioned this earlier, but this is basically trying to find users that were really valuable for you at a certain time and they stopped working. And the way you would find this is basically you share the user ID, so either the IDFA or the Android ID or AID from Google with us, and then we retarget that user elsewhere on our network. So I'll try to skip through this quickly, but you can figure out your own creatives and you make up your own little sort of segments of users, which segments got to a certain level but didn't get past that, make a custom creative for them, and we'll serve it to them on different apps where we see them. And you can make 5 categories, you can make 500 categories, figure out which users got to level 72, got to level 73, and then say, hey, we'll give you free coins, or we'll give you, your friends are waiting for you. There's a bunch of different things here. Yeah?
Is this more effective than push messaging to individual users with rewards directly to them?
It depends. If you have push messaging, that's one channel. We found this to be very effective. We have to be able to obviously find the user. But in general, we have a pretty big user store. But this tends to be a really good way. They're already in the gaming mode. So sometimes you do push messaging, they're not in the right mode to play. Here, they're already playing a game, and so people sort of in that mindset end up having, again, higher CTRs and CVRs from here. Again, here you basically just share the IDs with us, come up with the creatives and the custom groups, and then we serve the ads based on there. And this is just about us, so I'll leave this for next time. But any general questions you guys have? Yeah?
Do you normally use all 3 formats in the soft launch phase?
Yeah, you do that. I mean, some of these formats are newer, so video depends if you have the assets already there. Sometimes it takes some time to get the video assets. Native is pretty easy to do. Playable, we haven't done too much playable in the soft launch phase yet. Sorry, we haven't done too much playable, but with video and native, that's pretty common. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, guys.
So, yes, please. So fun bus news. Bus to GDC.
That's
Party
right.
on a bus.
That's right. All of the above.
And hacking.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. All of that. So, who here has done a hackathon before? Some hands. Awesome. So, TapSense is creating this awesome hacker bus to GDC Next LA in partnership with AT&T, Women Who Code, Pocket Gamer, and NVIDIA. We're leaving San Francisco on a Sunday, November 2nd, and driving on the Wi-Fi-enabled bus all the way to LA. Then Monday and Tuesday, the hackathon continues in a conference room at a hotel in LA. Participants will also get a pass to GDC Next if you want to check out the conference. So it continues, then we come
So you're
back.
not forcing them to hack all the way through the 4 days,
Right.
right? That was a question.
Wait,
You can leave.
Free ride and free conference?
That's right. Yeah, free ride, free conference, food, drinks, fun.
Cool.
It's going to be amazing. It's totally cool. Thank you. So yeah, so then we come back on Wednesday, Wi-Fi enabled bus, more hacking. So it's really a 4-day hackathon in November for GDC Next. The prize
But
is
you
10.
do not have to stay on the bus for all 4 days.
Right.
Okay.
It's not 4 days on a bus. That would be painful. But no, it's a.
Someone asked me that. So.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, it sounds a little misleading, I guess. But no, it's a 4-day hackathon. 2 days are going to be driving from San Francisco to LA and back. So again, it's a free trip to LA. GDC Next is going to be amazing. It's the App Developers Conference with GDC Next. So it's going to be huge. The prize is $10,000 in ad spend to the winning team. And TapSense people, raise your hand. We've got some team members here in the back. Yep, exactly. If you have questions about TapSense, please come up and talk to us. We are the leading independent mobile ad exchange. So when it comes to user acquisition or monetization of your apps, we can definitely speak to you about those items. If you want to get on the hacker bus, It's tapsense.com/hackerbus. Got some signs in the back there if you need to be reminded of that URL. But again, tapsense.com/hackerbus. Sign up. You can participate either on the HackerBus or remotely. So if the trip to LA is just not in it for you, you can participate remotely with the team. So again, yeah, talk to any of us here from TapSense. Get on the HackerBus. It's going to be awesome. Thank you.
Sure. When we were first contacted to be on the user acquisition panel, our response was, we don't know anything about user acquisition. Their response was, why do you still have a business after 4 years? Our response was, we cheat. So that's what I'm talking about today. So basically, well, a little about me first. I'm the CEO of Fifth Column Games. It's okay. I'm not good at that part of my job. But in my career, I've been an engineer, a designer, a producer, and a director at different companies across console, web, mobile, and PC. I've done all sorts of things, but as you can see, I'm still a developer. At Fifth Column, we've had a lot of different IPs, and we've only had probably 7 or 8 total shipped games. So 5 of them, or 4 of them, 5 of them, one of them is unannounced, are IPs, 4 of which are television. And then in the past, I've worked on some IPs, and my co-founders have also worked on a great number of them. So here, there's some hockey, some MLB, Iron Man, etc. So we know our way around IP, but so do a lot of people. This is about specifically TV IP. So what's special about TV? Well, what's special is user acquisition. It's not like other IPs. There's some overlap, but the real big one is this slide right here. User acquisition from TV itself. First off, commercials are the king of user acquisition. For anyone who hasn't had a television commercial, I highly recommend it. You get a really good yield based on the current viewership of that show. It has very little to do with your application itself. It has very little to do with the brand. It has to do mainly with how many people are watching that episode. They're hard to get, they're expensive to create, but once you've got them in the system, they'll put them back on the air. But you are a second-class citizen, and that's an ongoing theme with this talk. You may get bumped at the last minute, so that just happens. You have no control over it. Also, they may also put you on at the last minute. That sometimes is worse. You have to be prepared for real server spikes, not like ones that they don't come out of anywhere else in the industry. I think when we launched Pawn Stars, the game, we had no users, a couple thousand here and there for the first couple of weeks, and then we had 100,000 install in 2 minutes. So, yeah, my database slapped me in the face for that one. And I don't mean my DBA, I was the DBA, so the database itself. And a big part of the value of the commercial is talent. If you can get the talent, you're good. If you can't, you're still pretty good, but talent will probably double your output about.
You mean the people from the show?
Sorry, people from the show. They use the term so much, I forget that they're not as common. But yeah, the talent, the actors, the big names on the show. For Pawn Stars, we had one 3-second shot of Rick, the main guy, saying, like, "Pawn on," and then he started to laugh at the ridiculousness of what he had just said, and it cut the feed. So that's our claim to fame with that. Commercials are the biggest difference between this and anything else. To a lesser extent, lower thirds are nice. Lower thirds are the little things that slide up during your TV show and kind of get in the way, that annoy you. Some of them have sound, not often. They have a low yield based on viewership, but they're still not that easy to get your publisher to actually give you. But they're cheap to create, and once you get them, they'll put them on again and again. They still show lower thirds for the Pawn Stars game, and we're 4 years in. TV commercials, we get them occasionally, but we have to fight for everyone. Social media user acquisition, this is true with any IP, or anyone who has any social media at all. But the idea is TV shows tend to have more than most people. Twitter and Facebook, you get basically a low yield based on how well those particular things are doing. Followers, likes, etc. But they're easy to get. In fact, a lot of times when you make a game, this is part of the just assumption that you're going to get some tweets about it, and you're definitely going to get some Facebook posts, especially if you're making a game that has Facebook connectivity. So these are fine, but they're not that strong. Nothing compared to a commercial. But you do get those initial users in, and if you have a good product, you can get your numbers up to start, and everybody knows that helps.
Is that a trend with Facebook?
What do you mean?
Like 4 years ago, has it gone down versus 4 years ago?
Not really. I mean, it's never been great. It's just, I mean, I'm comparing it, this is comparative, so it's okay, but it's nowhere near the kind of yield you get from a TV commercial or something like that.
But you're starting with games based on TV shows. That in itself is an amazing task and achievement.
Right, well, I mean, having, you know, once you have the deal, you've got yourself, this is the talk about what you do once you've got that, basically. The game would have to be actually based on the TV show for most of this stuff, for most of these points to be valid. Paid acquisition, you all know everything about that. When you're working with a TV company, because they have these early means, they generally do paid acquisition after you've already shown them analytics. There's no like pre-marketing spend or anything like that. And a lot of times it's handled by a department that you haven't spoken to yet. So it's kind of a coin flip whether or not you're even going to talk to the right people or you're going to get any movement on this at all. It's not the core model of TV games in general, but sometimes if you can get them, they can actually be pretty good because if they can target them right, the brand strength will really carry them. When you've got a TV brand, you've got a very focused, targeted group, and it's more targeted than almost anything else you run into. So you get very good placement if you can buy the right ads. And then the website, the other, like, obviously it depends on the situation. Some brands, some TVs have websites associated with them. Most don't. They just sort of have like, hey, A&E Networks Television. If you drop down from the drop-down list, you can find Top Shot, you can find Pawn Stars, but they don't really care about that kind of stuff. There's not a lot of traffic going through those pages. They'll usually put you on there, but it's barely worth talking about. So the real focus is television. So the details on actually having a TV brand, and this is, you know, general to having branded IP, and, you know, but TV maybe a little more focused and pronounced. Most people have heard of TV shows, and the ones who recognize it and like that show are more likely to click on your thing. In fact, they're pretty likely. So when you are doing all your user acquisition, you have a really strong draw to those type of people. But your audience is also limited by that. Anybody who doesn't like the show or isn't interested in that show won't play your game, even if you've got a genre or a high quality game that they want to play. So you're basically putting yourself inside of a Venn diagram where you're niching, you're being niche no matter what, but it's a big niche. Also, it carries with it a large number of additional expectations on the product. No one wants to break even with a TV game. That's a big loss to them. They're spending opportunity capital. They're either giving you exclusivity or at the very least they're saturating the brand. So they want to see real returns. We've had games sunset that made, you know, a couple $1,000s a day in profits, and they still got sunset because they're like, hey, this brand's really good. We want to not saturate it. They also expect quality beyond the quality that's purely product focused. Quality isn't just engagement, it's also brand protection. So if you can make, it kind of goes both ways. If you make a game that's not profitable but it's high enough quality, sometimes they'll keep it around just because it helps focus the brand and improve it. So there's a lot of weird games that play. Also, politics are very pronounced, and you are not important to anyone. So as soon as politics steps on you, you're stepped on. I don't know how much time I have left because I have a really short talk, but if I have talk, I'll tell you a story about that. What's that?
I think unless folks want to hear it in their Q&A.
Okay, well I've got a Q&A thing, yeah. So we had a Duck Dynasty game, and if you all remember recently, Phil, one of the cast members, said some things he shouldn't have in an interview, some sort of bigoted media, and A&E said, hey, don't do that, we're kicking you off the show, and it started this negotiation. We had a game that we had made for A&E due to some lucky circumstance. We actually got a 50-50 profit share game that we made on our own dime, which is great for Duck Dynasty. It's like one of the biggest brands on cable television. Except when that happened, which happened after we had made the game, before they had put a commercial on the game, they cut all external advertising, including everything we did. So the game just got squashed. It basically we were a casualty of war in that process because a guy on a show somewhere said something he shouldn't, and it raised a big stink. And no one even cared about us. I mean, we were such small potatoes in the grand scheme of things. And that kind of thing happens. That's an extreme case, but every day something will happen that changes the flow of the way you do business, that's completely out of your control, and you can't even talk to the guy who knows the guy who knows the guy who has any power to do anything about it. So that's really all I got. I got it's a pretty short talk, and I got time for question and answer. So go ahead.
I just want to know the process of getting these licenses, because I've been at a major video game company, and we would go crazy trying to get licenses.
Well,
spend a fortune on prototypes and everything just to try to get movie licenses or book licenses. Just nuts.
Well, like most things, it's luck and timing. It's for us. I can't really say how it's done in quotes. I can say how we did it. We established our first job in the industry. We got founded over a project like this that a separate developer dropped the ball on. So I don't know how they got it. Probably through a friend type situation. But I was in the right place at the right time doing consulting work and picked up the contract. We built a relationship out of that success and then have been riding that relationship to get more of these things. I'm not sure how you would do it naturally. Also, from what I can tell over the last year or two, it's been getting harder and harder and harder. We have a lot of trouble finding new branded IP contracts, especially in television. Everyone's turning away from that and going for the, hey, we're going to sell our license to Zynga for a guarantee. And a low piece of the back end. There's a lot of that going on, and a lot less, paid or even rev share model stuff.
Any other questions?
How much of your, you touched on this Duck Dynasty, how much of your game is tied, because that's scripted reality, we know that, but yours is almost reality, because you're shifting the programming inside of your game, I would assume, to what is happening inside the show.
Sort of. We if you know the game, I can give you a quick kind of brief on the game. It's sort of it's a tycoon game, a little bit like Tiny Street, but the buildings are themed after big episodes. So we had the ability to roll out a new building and release it as a content drop that was tied to an episode from the show, but the game was not dynamically changing based on the story of the show. That would be too expensive to sort of develop a game around for us. We're pretty small. So we were going with something a little bit more like, hey, we draw a new building, that building fits into the template of what buildings do, but it looks like, the world's largest duck call or something else. And then there's some custom character animations for when they interact with that.
Okay, awesome. Is Commander in? So, first question, who are you? And where do you work for? What do you do? Why would you have an opinion on UA that folks here might fight on?
Sure, yeah, so my name is Brian Jacobs. I work for Grow Mobile. We're a mobile DSP, basically a media buying platform for application developers with a full suite of analytics that can sit behind the buying platform. We serve as an optimization engine for our team to optimize campaigns, ROI positive for our advertisers. I work with a ton of different game developers and brand developers helping market their mobile applications. So we see all sort of walks of developers, and I work with a ton of different traffic sources, and I focus a lot on our ad operations and just figuring out ways to scale campaigns and helping make developers money.
Awesome. And you guys just got acquired 2 months ago?
Exactly, yeah, we got acquired by an Israeli company called Purion Networks.
You guys may remember AJ from our talk. I believe it was last year. Who's the CEO of Grow Mobile. So glad you guys could be here. James?
Yeah, my name is James Pang. I'm the head of user acquisition and monetization at Storm8. And Storm8 is we are iOS and Android app developer. We have about more than 40 games on both platforms, and then we have over 50 million monthly active users, and we were a top 12 mobile app publisher last year based on revenue.
Awesome. An interesting thing about Storm8 as a company is never raised money, right?
Yeah, we're totally bootstrapped all the way.
Yeah.
We still have not raised any money to date. So
Awesome.
we've, there's sort of, I can sort of sympathize with some of the developers that don't, want to spend a lot of money, because we sort of react in the same way to the changes in the market, and we run our user acquisition platform, on a very ROI positive, sustainable basis.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, so that brings me to the first question. Is rising CPI making it impossible to succeed without large budgets?
Sure. I certainly don't think it's impossible. I think it's definitely making it a bit more difficult for a smaller developer that doesn't have a lot of cash on hand. I think it's becoming increasingly important to build a very polished, fleshed out game. And I'd have some categories in mind if I was recommending a category for a smaller developer to get into. It might give them a chance early on to build some revenue under their belts and kind of build a base that they might be able to piggyback another game on, call it starting with a casual game, maybe migrating into more of maybe a saturated category such as mid-core casino title. But so I'd say that, and then additionally, it's you can certainly still buy installs on a small scale and build some critical mass in an ROI positive manner. So yes, it's more difficult, but it's certainly not impossible. And we at Grow Mobile, we see developers break through very frequently. It's not uncommon.
I'll echo some of those thoughts. I mean, it's definitely, I would say the short answer is yes, it is a little more difficult, but what it really means is that sort of the cover charge or the entry fee is higher, but you just have to get smarter about it. So what I've seen is that prices have risen, and I am paying more per user, but what's also happening is my ROI is also rising because I can pay more for the users and the users and impressions that are valuable to me, but I can also sort of eliminate or pay less for the ones that aren't. And so what I see that is really, really important these days is you need to understand who your users are and what your product is, and that's super key. And there's a lot of tools these days that are making that a lot easier, such as channels like Facebook, Twitter, etc., that help you to target exactly who you want. So the key really is to sort of maximize the value of every single impression that you show out there, because in the past, I think a year ago or a couple years ago, it was a lot easier just to buy volume and just expect that to back out for you. But these days, you really have to maximize every single sort of view that you get. So what you need to do is need to understand sort of the end user. Understand sort of your product and how you're going to communicate that to them and sort of connect these things together.
Awesome. So this might be a variation for that question. I actually just got this over Twitter. Given the open bidding of most ad networks, how can you not end up paying what the biggest fool is willing to spend? And Mike, if you want to jump in on that, feel free to.
I guess on open bidding, you're talking about through like open exchanges or just
Facebook.
I think the idea of open bidding, like anyone can bid to raise the price up for the user, right? So everyone's bidding on an equal sort of platform.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thought on that is it just really depends. So on Facebook, it's again one site. When you look at a network, you look at a bunch of different sites. So you might have largest fool or whatever you call them, bidding up one specific site or one specific category, but there's other pockets of inventory that can work really well. So it just really depends. I mean, definitely if there are a lot of people with really deep pockets, they're going to cause the price of the market to go up. But there are ways around that, and there are other sort of channels or pockets of inventory that really make sense. And so, as James said, it's just like being smart about where you're spending, make sure that you're getting the right, and you're not trying to compete with those really large bidders.
And also about like what category of games you go into, right? So if you're going to match 3 games right now, that's very expensive users, right? You had some thoughts and categories that you think are emerging that would be where there's not a lot of people competing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess to preface this, what James was mentioning, not all impressions are created equal, and I certainly don't think that you're stealing somebody else's install. I mean, of course, there are a lot of developers that are going to be going after this particular subset of users, but I mean, just in general, from what we see, I'd say mid-core and casino, like I mentioned, are pretty competitive. We see a real big long tail, and where a small handful of games are sort of taking the lion's share of a lot of the revenue that exists in those categories. I think that some of the categories that, especially for a smaller indie developer, that have a real good shot at a lot of virality or some of the casual titles. So you look at even the top charts, the top 3 charts right now, it's the Dots games and Flappy Birds. That's probably a one-off example, but they're much easier, they're wide appeal, they're much easier to crank up the charts, and even down the line when you're looking to buy, ROI positively, ongoing, they're just easier to market. The CPIs are lower, the CTRs are higher, the conversion rates are higher. So if it was me going out, I think I want to start with a more casual game just to give myself some ability to build a big user base and give it a good shot.
I'll try to touch on a couple of those things. The first thing I was mentioned is, how do you sort of survive, and how do you react to this open bidding thing? And first of all, I may not understand that question correctly, but a lot of platforms are sort of opening up to RTB and opening up to exchanges, and they're starting to allow bidding across multiple channels just because they're opening up supply side. Everyone's constrained on supply, and so the way to sort of succeed and be smart about that is have a really good analytics infrastructure and be able to eliminate sources that don't work for you ASAP. Because the supply side, they can only optimize their side. All they know is how to increase the click to install ratio and sort of that as much data as you give them. But it's your role to sort of optimize for value and kill out the ones that just are not returning money for you ASAP. And so the second part of that question, how do you determine what categories to pursue? I would say, obviously you don't want to do things that are sort of overpopulated. I think it's really hard. That's a really hard question because I think the leaders in every single category changed year after year. And I would say that just because there's a lot of players in one doesn't mean that you can't come in and just crush it. Candy Crush it. But even that, I don't even know how long that's going to stay around. Candy Crush is bigger for the past couple years, but
Jewel was around for a long time before it, right?
In various forms, right?
But Jewel is in different forms,
right.
not always on.
But I would say even those two subcategories, like Jewel and Candy, I would say those are two subcategories that you could beat out, because I would say when I compete in those two categories, the CTRs are very different when I compete in like a Candy game versus a Jewel game. You can beat them at their own game if you're good enough, if your creative is good enough and your product is good enough. So I would say yes, you have to worry about that, but
so creative product and what user base you have, right?
Yeah,
because if you have the right demo for that type of game, yes. But if there's a two-person shop like some of the guys here who maybe have a demo for a completely different type of game, is that a good use of their time and money to actually try and compete in that market?
I would say that's tough because you don't understand that market. You understand the one that you have data on. I would say if you can leverage that to try to get some insights, then great. If you are really good at one thing, then continue doing that. If you're winning, then keep winning. I would say right now, given the current sort of U.S. and domestic landscape, there's sort of a disproportionate casual versus mid-core. Mid-core is very dominant in the Eastern world, so I would say there's definitely a lot of room in the sort of mid-core hardcore sector, specifically in the U.S.
Can you explain more about how to use Facebook to find your your exact demographic for your game, in the launch phase, so that at least now you know these are demographics. Can you talk very specifically what those are? Are we talking about likes, age? What is it?
Yeah, so if you want to find out your demographic, that's actually one thing that's really difficult with mobile. Is not a lot of people know who their users are, right? Because there's only so much data. So one easy way to do that is you have Facebook Connect. If you ask them to Facebook Connect, you can get a really quick profile on their users, and you can find out what the demographics are. But then you have to find out who the payers are, right? So in order to do that, then you start buying on Facebook. And I recommend you start broad, target everyone, figure out where the highest click-through rates, highest conversion rates are, figure out where your sort of eCPMs are sort of maximized, and then use that data to figure out really where's the payer conversion happening. Because even though you're getting a lot of users from young teenage girls, those probably not going to be the payers. So figure out where that is and figure out what's your maximum propensity to pay. Where is that specific area, and where can you sort of really juice that eCPM?
Just real quick on that topic, what tool sets are you using for those post-install events to track that?
For post-install events right now, I use has offers for third party. Yeah.
What about you guys?
On the post-install for Facebook?
Yeah.
We typically rely on third parties, companies like Adjust or Has offers, those that they can pass us to. And unfortunately, GrowMobile is not currently an MMP, but and a lot of developers can get direct access to that via Facebook Connect, and they can pass IDFAs to us, and we can do some of the post-install attribution.
Okay, thanks.
So on UA metrics, right? UA metrics for tracking. What should studios be? What are some metrics that they should be tracking, and are there out-of-the-box solutions for that, or should they build certain in-house solutions? And if they are, what should they be tracking with those?
Okay. I'll tackle that two parts. So the first is what metrics should you be tracking. The most, I'll skip the obvious ones, the LTV and your costs, but sort of beyond that, I recommend that you sort of start to layer in engagement. As you want to sort of migrate towards higher quality channels, and the platforms are trying to get away from incentivize and these more sort of gray area installs. You want to start to layer in sort of some sort of quality metrics. So what I recommend is some sort of cost per engaged user, so just cost per day 1 retained user, day 7 retained user, whatever's important to you, and that's different for every single I think app developer out there. For example, e-commerce might be like cost per booking or cost per something like that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or the
So-
drivers of your business, essentially.
Yeah, so I would say even beyond that, if you're really sophisticated, then you might want to start measuring like one thing I'm very conscious of is sort of saturation. Like on each network, how many users am I sort of rebuying that have already entered my network? We have 40 games; they're bound to sort of re-enter my network at some point. So I want to start measuring these metrics and making sure that every single dollar I spend is at its utmost efficiency. Second, regarding tools, StormMate, we were established 5 years ago, so we were around before a lot of these analytics guys were. So we had to build a lot of it in-house. But I'd recommend that you sort of outsource tools that are not so scalable, things that are very manual, such as, for example, tracking that needs to be set up with every single ad network out there. If it's very manual, I recommend that you outsource that to save yourself some trouble, unless you just got like unlimited engineering resources. So that's why I do use HasOffers or Tune as a third-party tracking provider. I recommend that you don't outsource whatever is your secret sauce. So for us, that's our LTV calculations, things like that. We prefer to keep that in-house in terms of our methodologies and how we define value. So it's just my general guidance.
Yeah, I mean, I guess breaking it into two parts as well. I think all these third-party analytics solutions do a great job of tracking all the core metrics that you need: retention, monetization, and event tracking, and all that. I do agree with LTV modeling that I'd certainly recommend working with your engineering team and your business analysis team to come up with some LTV model internally, and then kind of compare it to whoever you end up using. So HasOffers might kick back some LTV, and it's good to just get a benchmark and kind of a sanity check on what you're seeing in-house. I think another big metric that I would look at is K factor, or like your organic multiplier. So for every paid user that that you acquire, how many users free are you getting as a result of that? And in my experience, a lot of times it's easier, very early on in an app life cycle to get a solid read on that, because it can be super important for your UA efforts. If you can go out and acquire one user and you're getting a few extra for free on a real viral app, then it gives you the ability to be a lot more aggressive in your buying.
Is that easier to track now? Because I've had a speaker in the past say that I have all these organic users. I have no idea where they're coming from. I'm assuming that's word of mouth virality, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt, it's not super easy to track. It involves a lot of A/B testing, where you're maybe go and pause a bunch of traffic sources for X number of days, and then reactivate to try to get a sense for what how many additional organics you're receiving outside of your existing organics, and get a formula behind it. But again, just back to it's important early in the life cycle, because you have very few paid users and even very few organic users. So it's very evident when you throw in some paid acquisition. You can quickly calculate that.
Mm-hmm. So over the last 6 events, so we have a lot of these events monthly, sometimes once in 2 months. There's this one guy who keeps coming to the events. He has a user acquisition role, and every time I see him, he's working at a different company. Right? And I'm wondering to myself, why? How does he keep getting hired across all these things? And it turns out he gets in right close to a game launch time. He does really well for them, uses that to go work somewhere else, right? So for everyone else here hiring for a UA role, who maybe don't want to dish out the money that this guy takes to stay with them for 2 months, what kind of skills should you be looking for in the people that you hire for UA in your team?
For me, like my own background is in finance, and I came straight from finance into doing marketing. I used to work actually building across the street, just in financial, just working in private equity. So it's very analytics focused, very returns driven. So I'm focused on, after spending $1, how are you going to make that dollar back? So that's my background, and it translated pretty well for user acquisition, and that's where I've tended to draw a lot of talent from. I feel like look outside the space because everyone's trying to. I feel like the space is very everyone competitive, a little ancestral. People are going from one. I think I change account managers at some networks like every month.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's nice to get fresh talent from outside that's not fresh mind, and they know a certain concept like return. So look at what is extremely crucial to you in terms of like a technical skill and find out where that is. And I mean, someone took a chance on me, and that's how I ended up in this industry. So I might look somewhere else.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, certainly in addition to the analytics, it's super important that somebody can go, scrub some data and make sure that you're buying, that you're making money on every install that you buy. But I think we're still finding that the market is so fragmented, and where you're acquiring these installs, it's important to have relationship skills, and you can establish relationships with these ad networks, and work with our top-notch account managers to make sure that you're getting access to the best of the best inventory. We're finding that a rock star account manager at a chart booster, whoever the network is, can really help you scale efficiently. And then additionally, just somebody who's got some thick skin to go and try these networks. I mean, every other day there's a new ad network that's popping up, and Grow Mobile's mentality is that you have to continue testing, you have to continue trying everything that's out there, because it can be difficult after a while for certain titles to maintain scale at an efficient rate. So yeah, I just think someone that's willing to kind of grind it out, and who has some technical understanding of how attribution works and how all the data is flowing around is super important.
Mm-hmm. So there are lots of different UA channels now, both on device and off device, right? What has been performing well for you, and any sort of any light you could shed on that? What should people be trying out and testing out? Awesome.
Sure. Couple things. The obvious one is Facebook, and the reason that's been performing so well is targeting, right? I mean, if you know who you want to get, then that's that's exactly what it is. Then go get it, and that's what Facebook is. So that works out extremely well in terms of they have all the key elements. It's targeting, which is volume, value, and also return. So all that is crucial. I would say in terms of not just channels, but like media, in terms of different forms. Like Mike touched on a lot of these before. Interactive interstitials are great, videos are great, just things that help to communicate what you're trying to say to the user, trying to communicate your product to the user better. That's what I see working extremely well. Its conversion rates are skyrocketing, and users are staying in the game and being engaged. So it's getting a lot easier to not only find channels with good targeting, but there's a lot more media that's out there that works extremely well.
Yeah, certainly Facebook has been a big one that we see our advertisers using. Still video. I think that maybe 12 months ago or so it really kind of kicked in, but to piggyback on what Mike was saying earlier, I mean, we really find that after these users go through, they watch an entire clip. Granted, they're incentivized to watch the clip. That they're making that decision to go and actually download the application. They're what's the word I'm looking for? But they're very conscious of what they're getting into. They're not getting to a landing page and they're like, oh, this looks like an arcade game and it's a battle card game. They have so the conversion rates tend to be higher. The intent is much higher, and so the LTVs that we see on video users and the scale too. I mean, just the sheer number of installs per day you can get from the video networks tends to be really high. Outside of that, I think that we're excited for some of these viewable and even playable units that some of the networks are coming out. I think are really interesting. Right now they're pretty small scale, but I think at some point you literally have this interstitial that pops up and you can play a level of a game. I think that's going to be pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm. So someone asked about cost per engagement during Mike's talk. And one of our mentors for the Accelerator actually wrote a pretty nice piece on Gama Sutra on cost per engagement, and that's what the industry should shift to as opposed to cost per install. Curious, what are your thoughts on it? And any way that in the absence of getting it from networks, people will be building that in?
Sure. I mean, I would say the engagement is a different definition for every company and every product. If if a product has extremely high, K factor and organic, it might not even matter. You might just need to focus on installs, and so that might be the most important metric. So it really depends on your product. So I would say look at the key core factor that is driving your value. So if it's 3 logins, that drives the highest value users, then focus on that. But that's sort of the bottom line.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's becoming more and more important for developers to have a very deep understanding of what works, and if they find that a user that gets to pass level 1, for example, in their game is 10x more likely to be a top 10% payer or whatever it might be, you have to go for it. And outside of that, I think that we're in a place right now where we're needing to find more creative ways to drive high quality users at scale. I mean, I sometimes talk to my team about there's a lot of times a finite number of high quality ROI positive users at a certain CPI where you're making money on it. So we're always looking for creative ways to get out of that and just try anything new that's coming down. So I think it's here to stay.
Okay. And so final question for me, how much focus should a developer place on creative and creative testing? And in what ways does creative performance impact UA efficiency?
So I'll take a stab at that. There's obviously a lot of levers that you pull, and it's most important to have a good product that you can even start marketing. But the levers are either click-through rate, conversion rate, and then how much you spend per user. And the last one you probably want to dial up is your CPI. So why not focus your time on sort of expanding that funnel? And I would say and CTR has an outsized sort of return. If you increase your CTR by maybe 20%, it could lead to a 50% increase in installs, depending on how it affects your eCPMs. What I've seen is even maybe more impactful is you can actually increase your conversion rate too by, you can spend some time working on the App Store optimization, working on the landing page, and taking your best learnings from sort of CTR optimization and applying them to that thing that opens up the bottom of your funnel. So by doing that, you can really leverage every single dollar that you spend. So I'd say do every single thing that you can to increase that funnel before you increase the amount that you spend per user. Make sure you use your creative optimization to better things like your product, better things like your screenshots. You're wasting money if you're not. But yeah, I would say make sure you dial every single lever that you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, the creative really dictates your ability to acquire users at scale at a specific CPI. I always say eCPM is king for the networks. At InMobi, they're going to prioritize you according to your eCPM, and that there's CPI is only one of 3 factors that actually impacts the CPM. So getting your CTR and conversion rates up is super important, and it allows you to boost your margins and the whole bit. So and it's generally fairly inexpensive to do creative testing. You find the right designers and all that. So
I'll throw a few data points out there. So I think on let's see, Upside, one of the networks I work with, we improved one of the creatives by I think from a 6% click-through rate to a 10% click-through rate, and I achieved a sort of sustained 30% increase volume over the next 2 months. And so just doing that work, it was very little work. We just did some A/B testing, and even doing that sort of improved our output without spending any more dollars. And the second one is App Store optimization. Did a lot of work with our product team, worked super closely to eventually increase our overall conversion rate by even something as low as it was about 10%, and that increased the organic installs by 50%, just indefinitely. So that little amount of work can really sort of spike your performance.
Question: so when you said you optimize app store optimization, so we're talking about icons here?
Could it be anything from icon to your screenshots to your text? It's a combination of both.
So how do you test those? Do you just run different icon tests against your own, or do you run them against a control like your competitor to see which one gets better clicks?
You can do all the above. I recommend testing a combination of your own icons that you think would succeed. It's often a trade-off. You can get an icon that has high organic, but users are really confused what the app is, and vice versa, where a user really knows what the app is, and you get a high-value user but lower volume. So it really depends.
So do you test each piece separately, or do you test icons and screenshots in one test?
I would say to build that, I test them each separately, but the ultimate thing is you need a package that works.
Okay.
Yes.
This industry seems like it's got this abundance of choice, which at the onset seems like, oh, that's interesting. You can do video, you can do this, and you can do that. But I think the reality is most of us got in this game not to do that. We don't actually care about that choice. We actually care about the same thing. Right? We just care about LTV greater than the cost of acquiring that user. And whether it be cost of engagement, whatever metric you want to pick, it just seems like it's ultimately a proxy for LTV. So my question is, for small indie studios, we don't have the resources to build the infrastructure you guys have at Storm8. When do you think this industry might be a little bit more automated and true consolidation to happen? Because again, like we don't want the choice. I'd say we don't. You ask us, do you want a high quality user, medium quality user, low quality user? And the answer is all the above at the right price.
You can ask these in movie folks. I think programmatic is sort of around the corner. It's like a lot of platforms are starting to consolidate. I sort of mentioned earlier that there's a lot of sort of more true DSPs emerging where you're connecting like RTBs with all these networks and all the demand side, connecting with the supply side. But a lot of those are really emerging these days, and a lot of technology is being built up right now. In fact, I'm testing a lot of them with a few of my key channels. So you'll see that become easier. You won't have to buy 30 different channels at once.
Well, I see these ad networks sell about the fact that you can have an account person call you and be in contact with you here today. And to me, I look at it and say, isn't this a math problem? Isn't this something where you don't have to call me, you don't have to talk to me, you can solve it on your own? Because again, like the more time I have to talk to them, the less time I have to work on the stuff that actually makes our product great, right? Whether it be storytelling, pipeline, tools design, et cetera. So.
I think we're starting to see, the whole industry's headed this direction, right? We're starting to see RTB and RTB 2.0 coming out hopefully in the next, 6 to 12 months. But we're even seeing certain ad networks carve out a chunk of their inventory to be biddable, right? So if you build bidding technology or potentially go to a single ad network, you can now buy on, these, I won't name names, but just normal ad networks. You might have to pick up the phone and call account manager and say, hey, I want to buy some ads. In this case, you could just go through your bidding technology and do it. But it's certainly a problem that there's a ton of people.
Wasn't this the original idea behind Grow Mobile? It's like, let's give people more intelligence on all the different ad networks and what they're actually providing, right? So all at one source, at one place.
Absolutely, yeah. So you can certainly go through sometimes we refer to us as meta DSPs, but Grow Mobile is a company that has integrations with 90 plus ad networks, and it's very turnkey. You can come to us. You have an account manager. You have a single SDK, and you sort of blast your campaign out to all these ad networks. So that works very well. I mean, I'll be upfront in saying that it still requires a lot of human interaction from either Grow Mobile account managers to other network account managers, but we're certainly building tools around that. But I think to more directly answer your question, I think in the next year we're going to see a big shift to programmatic. I mean, we've been talking about it for years, but I do think there's a lot of tools being built today, and ad networks being more willing to open up their inventory to just full-blown programmatic buying. So.
Do you think we're going to see a shakeout and a move more towards larger publishers just simply picking and choosing the smaller titles they think they can effectively market at a positive ROI?
Third-party publishers?
Yeah, basically, I know that there are large companies, particularly some mid-core companies in this area, that are basically now looking at, titles. Like, for example, we had one game that was a really highly rated 5-star game, but we just didn't have the muscle to really push it out there. But we found a company that had marketed a game like it in their own product line, same audience, different type of game, but the same exact audience, and we just handed it off to them because 70% of something is worth more than 100% of nothing. You think there'll be a move towards publisher
Have you seen a lot of third-party publisher successes recently, or because last stat I saw in that top 25, nothing was a third-party published game, right? It was basically more original IP, self-published, right?
I'm not going to name names, but there's some very large companies in the Bay Area that are actually running pretty extensive.
So actually, we should talk about this offline, but some of them I've talked to directly. The games that they are publishing here are actually from foreign developers. Not so much stuff that they've, especially mid-core, right? So a lot of stuff you hear about third-party publishing, none of them are US developers, and there's a reason why. It's because like a Chinese developer somewhere else didn't have the user base, just worked with some of the bigger guys, right? Third-party publishing in general, I don't think has been I mean, unless you guys do anything otherwise.
I mean, yeah, I generally agree with that. I think the regular publishing model is very difficult, like where you're hiring someone to just really do UA for you, and you know, you're sort of doing rev share on that. I think, you know, pure play, I don't know how long that'll stick around, but you know, like Storm 8, we are a publisher as well. We do publish, we're very selective, but we do publish games in the US or worldwide. And you know, last year we had, I think a PR manager is gonna get angry at me if I get this stuff wrong, but I think we had like 24 games that hit the top 25 iOS last year. So we have the capacity to do so.
How much do you publish in a given year? How many games versus your own?
So right now we do about well, so again, our publishing business is really just starting. So we've worked on a couple contracts, and we're still signing those on. On our own games, we publish around one a month.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly see more and more companies like Scopely and Pocket Gems, even Storm 8, pushing them out. And I think, like James says, you know, both the publisher and the developer need to be very selective on it. They're working together, you know, really get a deep understanding of what, you know, what help they're getting. Is it engineering? Is it designing help? Is it UA help? And
is the user base the same?
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
That's
So.
On the other side, what about advertisers going for profit sharing deals rather than just straight ad revenue?
Hey, and Moby.
It's on the books, but we haven't actually done it yet. So we've definitely been in discussions with some of our biggest customers about it, but there's no clear model on that yet.
Do you have a UK presence?
Sorry?
Do you have a UK presence?
Yeah.
Real money, he's asking.
How are you protecting some of your IP? You know, in terms of having it be knocked off illegally, or you know, like what are some of the steps you're doing to protect IP, defend
Move
her?
as fast as you can.
Yeah, quickly, but I think it's building the right relationships with all the different platforms, as many as you can, and the key ones. We do have some struggles in China, for example. I think a lot of our titles have been pirated, which is, you know, to be honest, is great when you hear that there's, I think, 1 million pirated users of Bubble Mania in China, but would love to those to be legitimate users. But I think it's key to, you know, develop relationships with the right platforms in those geos that you want to protect. Otherwise, it is pretty darn challenging internationally.
This question is for James as well. As far as the cross promotion aspect goes, what's Storm 8's strategy for promoting apps internally?
What's our strategy for promoting internally? Well, we would produce games that you know, we basically take note of what our users would like to play, and we promote games that we basically show them other apps that we create. And the games that we create, like I mentioned, we produce about 12 a year. And the first thing we do is show them to our users and say, hey, do you want to play these games? We show them ads. We show them our own internal ads, and most of them, our average user plays you know, more than one game. And the great thing is, you know, when they do play multiple games, they have quite a high LTV. Our stats show that users that play more than two Storm 8 games, they're worth more than four times an organic user. So the first step is to promote internally and say, hey, you know, are you interested in these? Because most often the games that we produce are the right genres for those users. So why not show to it? It's for free too.
So since we're way more than half an hour past when we were supposed to end, let's give these guys a hand. Alright guys, there is a little bit of food and drinks, actually no food, but there's some drinks left. Let's continue the networking, and otherwise, the program part is over. We'll see you again next month.
Good, it's good.